Good morning, everyone. Wanted to have a discussion with you today, going through some of the reviews that have just gone online for the A9, the Sony A9. There was an embargo put on by Sony to stop people sharing images and things like that or videos until I think it was yesterday. So there's been a stack of videos released early today. Australian time anyway, or overnight. So I thought we could go through some of those.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Discussion with you today. Oops, better turn that off. So I thought we'd go through all of those today and sort of see what your opinion is about what you think if you're going to pre-order the camera, whether you think you'll switch over, what you think of actually the interviews or the reviews that have gone out online. So I thought we'd all go through those together. So I'll just put a comment in and just see if anyone is live. Just let me check down here, because I'll log on and just see if we can see it. Yeah, okay. All right, because it'll be interesting to see if people do log on. It's very early Australian time here. Well, it's not that early, I suppose. It's 9:30. I'm not sure what time it is where you are, but I thought we'd go through all of the things that most of these reviewers are saying online, because it's a bit interesting. I think the problem was there's no real live views. Well, when I say real live views, there's been no reviews yet done on this camera in a real life situation. Sony did do the live demonstrations in New York when this was released, but the problem was there was so much lighting involved and everything like that over there that it was very controlled. So I wanted to talk to you about that, because they haven't let just a normal photographer take this out and do photographs at this stage or share the work. So it was a very controlled shoot that they put up. If you looked at the ice hockey rink, they had lighting that was above. If you looked at the boxing ring, there was so much lighting on there. It looked incredible, because you could see lighting from all sides. So even the yoga exercise was so very well lit up. So it's hard to say whether how much you can actually take from that, how reliable the actual camera will be in real life. So I thought we'd have a chat about that and what some reviewers are saying as well. So if you do pop on, just say hi so that we can see where you're all from. I can see there's 10 watching now. So please say hi, guys, because we can all have a chat. Make sure that you can all see me and hear me well enough. And then you can start throwing some questions. Hi Ali, how are you, mate? Good to see you here as well. So there's a few things that I've noticed. I've watched quite a number of videos this morning. I watched Tony Northrup's, I watched Photo Record Toby's, I watched Manny Otis's, there was Jason's video as well, and there was a few others that have been done. I'm just going to open up another YouTube window, because I'll just see how many that have been logged on this morning. So if I go to YouTube, and we can have a look and just see basically how many that we've looked at. So I looked basically this morning, and there was one from the Photo Video Show. There was also one on, let me have a look. I'll just see if I can find history, because I watched quite a number this morning. It's easier to check on my phone. Easier to check on my phone, I think. I know there was Photo Record Toby did one, and I know the Northrops have done one. Max Urov has done one as well. Let's have a look. That one camera guy has done one this morning as well. So who else have I watched? Gary Fong obviously has done one showing slow motion on the A9. Digital SLR Video has had a discussion on it as well. The Photo Video Show, has had one. Manny Otis, which I mentioned before. Jason Vong has also had a talk about them as well. And Steve Huff has had a talk about them as well. Like I said, some of those people actually were Sony artisans and stuff, so you know, you've got to watch that too. I'm not saying all of them are impartial, but I know some may be. I don't think people like Jason Lanier and things like that well, I don't think that they tell lies. I think they do actually believe what they say, but there's some that I would wonder about how much truth they're telling, because sometimes it just seems like they're just giving a Sony spin, so you do have to watch that. Let's see who else is on here. Melissa Carpenter, hi Melissa. Peter Sav, hi. Good to see everyone in. Yeah, keep saying hi guys, because it'll be great to see how many are watching at the moment, and it's great to actually have a talk about what's going on. I'll just check down here. Yeah, we've got 13 watching now, so it's picking up. Beautiful. Okay. All right, so let's get started. A couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about. I've written a couple of things down on my phone because I thought it's a good way of mentioning a couple of these things about the camera. Now, I'm going to go through some of the things that I think aren't so good about this. Ali said, they said it's better than the Nikon D500. Well, I hope it would be, Ali, for the price that this camera is. If it wasn't beating a Nikon D500, you'd be in trouble. But from what I've seen, I mean, I've never owned the Nikon D500, but that's an incredible camera for the actual price that they're asking for that camera. It's actually a really great sports camera. It is APS-C, but that can be an advantage in sports too, because you have the extra reach. But I have heard from everyone that's reviewed that the focusing is amazing. The low light focusing on that camera is amazing. So certainly if they beat that camera, well, they're well on the way to getting a really good result. Junad said, hi mate, how are you? Now, I want to go through a couple of things that I've written down here that basically no one really is talking about at this stage. So I'll go through the bad parts and then we'll discuss the good parts about this. But one of the bad things not many people are mentioning is, I know that this camera does 20 frames per second, but if you shoot over 5 frames per second, it goes immediately down into 12-bit mode. Now, I'm not sure how much that affects the image quality. No one's really discussing that at this stage. Photo Record Toby did sort of mention that he couldn't see any difference, but the problem is at the moment there's no RAW converters for this, so they're opening it up through a Sony app, which you know, just basically won't give you the true RAW files at this stage. Because I noticed, I saw a couple yesterday, I can't remember who they were, but they showed some of the images. It might have been Tony Northrup, I'm not sure, or Max Urov, I think it was. But he had the images and they didn't look very good at all, and he was blaming the RAW converter for that, and it probably is that. So no one at this stage still really can tell how these images are going to look until the proper RAW converters are released, like in Lightroom or programs like that. But the image itself does drop down to 12-bit if you shoot over 5 frames per second, so you do have to be wary about that. And I'm not sure what the implication is going to be if you're really trying to push the shadows and stuff on those images, whether you'll get anywhere near the results that you get on a 14-bit file like you would if you were shooting less than the 5 frames per second. So that's a thing that not many people are talking about. Keep throwing your questions up too, guys, because I'd love to answer a few. There was also a report about some bug about tracking with 4 runners and stuff running down that runway. If you noticed, a lot of the time they were just focusing on the one, but the problem is, I think this has still got that issue with your tracking. The Sony cameras and the ones I'm using aren't very good if you actually try and track subjects by selecting them on the back and then it will follow them sort of like that. Their algorithms apparently are not very good, so the tracking is still not even good in this camera either, apparently. So that's an issue as well. So basically that part of the camera won't work. So if you did want to track a certain object, apparently it does skip between multiple objects or multiple people. It will jump off one to the other. So that's an issue as well. Lenses, obviously, if you're talking about a sports photographer, well then clearly lenses are going to be an issue, but that is going to disappear over the next probably couple of years. I'm sure that Sony now have released this camera, they're going to start releasing high-end sports type lenses, which are the 4 to 600s. They have to do that if they're marketing this as a sports photographer camera, but that I think will be addressed. What else have we got? Dynamic range. Now, Dynamic range and IQ, picture quality. Tony Northrup showed this. his images actually were nowhere near as sharp or as good from the A9 as what they were from the A7R2. I mean, it was quite drastically different. So you probably do need to look at that video if you're thinking the quality will just be as good as what an A7R2 is. It's clearly nowhere near as good as what that is. So that's an issue. That's probably why if I end up getting this camera, if I weaken and I get gas, but I won't be getting it before it's released so I can see what the results are like. If I do get it, I'll definitely be keeping my A7R2. I won't be selling that. Ali has just said, what do you think Sony will announce in June? Well, I'll talk about that soon, Ali. We'll go through that. Let me just finish this and then I'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. So the dynamic range and the IQ is nowhere near as good as what the A7R2 is. So I think if you're a portrait photographer or a landscape photographer particularly, I like to have that dynamic range. For me, that is a major thing, and I put a video on there showing the amazing recovery of the A7R2 the other day, so you can look back and see that. It'll be interesting to see if it's anywhere near as good. Well, according to Tony Northrup, it's not, and those images he showed weren't anywhere near the same. The other thing as well, the sharpness was nowhere near as good. But you'd have to expect that when you're talking about the megapixels between these two cameras. Another issue was no QXD slot. I can't understand why Sony didn't do that, seeing that's their format. They actually invented that format. It must be something to do with the camera size, but they probably should have put one of those in and then had another SD, the faster SD card, as the backup to that, because there's issues with the buffer. And that's been shown a number of times that if you do max out the buffer, it can take up to 2 minutes to actually clear. Now, there's some stuff I've seen on the net saying you can't use the camera while that's happening. I don't think that's true, because I think you can. I think you can keep shooting, and you can even access the FN menu, but you can't access your full menus while that happens. And also, when the buffer starts to get full, if you're trying to review the images on the back of the camera, it really slows down dramatically. And if you do fill the buffer up completely, it will keep shooting, but it's very slow. But I'm not sure how many sports photographers, and this is the thing, I'm not a sports photographer, I'm a wedding and portrait photographer and fashion. I will probably never ever fill that buffer up. I would only be shooting for, probably 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds. I'm not going to fire off 200 rounds of these things. And apparently if you do that, you can shoot forever, so it will just keep going. So I'm not sure how much of a big thing the buffer is. What else? Oh, well, actually, before we do that, I'll just answer Ali's question. What do we think will be announced in June? Well, I wouldn't be surprised. This comes out the end of May, the A9. It's, I think, the first week in Australia. First week of June. I don't think anything will be released or even mentioned before then, because they won't want to basically lose some of the money that they're going to make from this A9. I'm pretty sure, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm almost certain that they have to release a camera that will replace basically the A7 II. And that will probably come before they replace the A7R2, I think. Because the issue is they can't expect people to have such a massive jump in their cameras between the A7 II as it is at the moment, which is $2,000 or whatever it is. They can't then expect people to jump from there up to nearly $5,000. It just doesn't make sense. So for the average wedding photographer or the average portrait photographer, they need something in that range of around of what the A7 II is. Now that camera is really old now, and I wouldn't recommend anyone to buy that at the moment. I'll be getting the A6500, but they have to replace that A7 II. So I think what we will probably see is a new A7 III. Now, I could be wrong, but that's what I believe it will be. And again, I think it's going to have more of the video features that you see now in the A7 III, and it'll probably have the same fast focusing that that the A9 has, but clearly it won't have the same frames per second, things like that. That'll be where it changes a little bit. Whether they put the joystick on the back, I'm not sure, but it certainly will have better resolution, or a similar resolution, but it'll certainly have better dynamic range, and it will also have better video. One of the main things too that I'm noticing too is Sony, what are you thinking leaving the S-Log out? I know people are going to say, but this is a photography camera. I think that's absolute crap, because to me, seriously, my A6300 and 6500. If you get the RX1, all have log in them. Now, if you're trying to match footage between multiple cameras, you can't do it with this camera, which in Australia here is $7,000. Now that's just crazy. Sony, what are you thinking? Don't start being Canon or Nikon and holding features back. That has to be put back in firmware. If you don't, you're going to cost yourself sales. So I just think that has to be put out there right from the beginning. Let's see what other questions we have. Ali says, I'll switch over to these so that you can see some questions that do come up. Let me just go to desktop. So Ali has said, what do you think Sony will announce? Well, obviously I've discussed that. And Ali has said they're also promoting it for sports and pro shooters. Yeah, they are. And that's one thing with this. But even then, I don't think, the thing I admired about Sony was they never held anything back in that respect. They could easily bring out an A7S or an i9S version of this, and they could put 4K 60p on it. That could be the thing that differs between this sports photography camera, the A9, and the A9S, because it could have 4K 60p in that camera. It should still have log. There's no reason why log should be kept out of that, even though that this is a sports, etc. camera. It still should have the full featured video facility, because apparently all the video shooting that was demonstrated on it, Max Urov said that this camera was amazing for video. The Camera Store TV also said that it was amazing for video. But apart from the log. Now, when the Camera Store TV were doing it, that's Jordan, he was actually saying that he had real issues with it being backlit and things like that, getting the dynamic range out of the video. So there is an implication for this. And remember, as time goes on, more and more sports photographers and journalists and things like that are using these cameras are going to be wanting to grab video snippets as well. So Sony, what are you thinking? You can't think that this is just going to be for photography, for sports shooters. These type of people will eventually be doing video as well. You're just cutting off your own market. It's just a stupid thing to do. You need to fix it. Ali said A7 III is logically due. Yeah, and that's what I think too. So, you know, I definitely think the A7 III is going to be the next one that comes up. I don't think they'll be releasing another A9 model. They may, but I think that it's going to be that. Now, whether they do keep the A7 series going, or whether it all jumps to the A9, or whether it even jumps to an A8, you know, it's just going to be interesting to see what they actually do. So guys, if you have any other questions, just, you know, pop in and say hi. Give me some questions. So tell me what you're thinking about if you're going to buy this camera, if it tempts you, whether you think that, you know, you could jump ship on it. Ali said, yeah, missing S-Log is a bad mistake. I agree, mate. That's just ridiculous. I cannot understand why they've done that at all. And I just think Sony, whether they're testing to see if people really, you know, get their backsides up on this, and then they might change it. But I just don't want them to go down that, you know, that line of thinking. Let me just come back to me for a minute so you can see my lovely big head. Now, let's talk about some of... Oh, now there is a couple of other things I wanted to go with you about this too. There's no apps on this. It's missing play memories. Now, that becomes an issue for me in one big respect, because I love the fact that I can now shoot with these Sony cameras, and I've beaten the time limit, so I can shoot for as long as I like now with these without that half an hour shutting off. I'm not sure whether that's what Sony, why they've done that, to stop that path to getting into there. I'm not sure, but that's now no longer available. And even though they're saying this is a professional sports camera, you still can use some of those apps. So I think it's a bit silly to take that out. I really can't understand that either. They really should be incorporating Play Memories apps into it as well. What else? There was another thing too that I was going to talk about. Can't remember. It'll probably come back to me shortly. Yep, can't remember. All right, now we'll go through some of the good things. Let me come back to over here. Obviously, the autofocus is amazing. One thing that they're saying though is if you're shooting at 15 frames per second, and it's on autofocus, it is actually only shooting around 14 frames per second. So I'm not certain what they mean by 20. It must be not doing fully autofocus at 20 frames per second. So you are only getting 14 frames per second on that. What else? So obviously the focus it looks pretty amazing though, but like I said, you haven't seen this yet in a real life situation. So anything probably could have done well. I'm sure my A6 500 would have done amazing in those lighting conditions as well. So, you know, that's an interesting thing. So we really have to wait until we see this camera in real life. And that's why I'm saying be careful if you buy this on specs, because it's very, very hard to tell how this camera will really go until you see it in real life. Sony were very controlling on how they showed that camera off. Obviously the EVF is a major bonus too. Apparently that's it's about another 1 million dots or something in the viewfinder. So it is so much better, and it doesn't flicker at all, so there's no blackout, which has to be incredible if you're shooting sports and things like that. Hopefully being able to review the images instantly. No one's really talked about that yet, but I'm hoping the one thing I can say when I'm using my Sony cameras in weddings, it can be really frustrating if you go to Chimp and have a look at the back, press the button to view the image because you weren't quite sure if it was right, and it takes a few seconds to actually open. I'm hoping that if you do shoot with the shutter on this, that eliminates that and you can view the image straight away. Now the A6 500 has got rid of that, so I'm hoping this camera works that way. The electronic shutter obviously is really good. It's quiet, super quiet, so there's no noise. But again, this has all been shot too in control lighting. It'll be interesting to see how, if there's any banding. I think Max Yurov showed some banding that he showed in an image in his review. So there is clearly still some banding there sometimes. It could just depend on lighting. What could be a worry is if you were shooting with this in a wedding and then basically you just look at the viewfinder at the back and you think it's okay, you get back to the studio or whatever, check, and then you have got that banding that's actually in the image. So you'd have to do quite a bit of testing on this before you could sort of go live in a wedding situation or something like that. Because lighting situations can be so different in some of these wedding venues. You know, you can have all different lighting all over the place, different frequencies or whatever that are flashing off. And if it did start to give you that banding, it could be an issue. So that has to be tested. The silent shooting clearly could be amazing if you're talking about being in a quiet situation of shooting in a wedding or something like that, or a dance recital or something like that, a dance concert, baby photography, things like that. Let me just have a look. Michael. Hi Michael, how you going? Have you still got your camera on order? I know you had one on pre-order. Talked to the Sony rep yesterday, and Sony is considering putting S-Log back in the camera, is what he said. A lot of feedback is making it clear. Yeah, well, I hope so. I hope they listen. Canon listened, but they forced it as a $100 upgrade, I think. So Canon initially didn't put that in the new 5D Mark IV or whatever it is. So they didn't include that, but they've just recently released it due to, obviously, the feedback and complaints that they got. Yeah, so let me know if you've still got it on order, Michael. So it'll be interesting. Marcus said, hope shutter life is good at 20 frames per second. Well, the thing is, Marcus, there is no shutter life. So because it's using that electronic shutter, it's irrelevant for this camera. So that's one of the great part of this camera is that you don't have to worry about your shutter ever. Now the shutter, the mechanical shutter is rated at 500,000, so basically that would probably last the life of this camera. But the electronic shutter should last forever. Now one of the things that should be reliable about this camera is that really there's no moving parts, which is, you know, the main part about this that makes it good. But when Sony said that there's no moving parts, I think they're not counting things like the sensor, which clearly is moving. So that could be one of the potential things that could break down, you know, over time and how much it's used. Because it's stabilized, how much is that shutter moving around when you're dealing with 20 frames per second? So that could be interesting. Michael has said, yeah, but going back and forth. I know it's a hard decision. Like I was just saying before, Michael, it's a tough thing to buy on specs until you actually see how it functions. There's things that worry me that I'm not certain about yet is like I said, with the flash sync, that you do have to go back to using your normal 5 frames per second. So there's no benefit really than using your A7R in that respect. The dynamic range worries me a little bit. And the IQ clearly, you know, worries me. If you look at Tony Northrup's video, that worries me a little bit. The image didn't look sharp when he blew those two images up compared to the A7R. But the images overall still look fine, but I'm just talking about how it compares to the A7R. Studio 96 said, if light is difficult, you can always switch to mechanical shutter for weddings. It's not a big deal. And yeah, you're probably right. You probably can switch over. And then hopefully the focusing will still be as good. And like I said, the problem is at this stage, Studio 96, that no one's tested this in real light conditions like that. So we don't know how good it is under normal lighting conditions in a wedding reception, for instance, or a church that's very dimly lit. We don't know that yet. So we've still got to wait to actually see that. Let's have a look. Junad said, am I wrong? I am waiting for the A7 III to be announced. Yeah, and I think a lot of people may do that because it's hard to know which way to turn at this stage. And like I said, I'm drawn, and I may get this camera, but I'm certainly going to wait until it's released before I get it. I want to have a go at this camera before I actually think about purchasing it. But if an A7 was to be released straight after this, you'd think, oh, you know, I'm not sure which way I should have gone. And that's what you've got to worry about, because an A7 III may have nearly all of these features apart from the fast frame rate. So it's hard to know. I can't see them doing an A7 III and cutting back on the video features. I just can't see them doing that, because that tends to be more of a video and photography type camera. The same as the A7R has been. They've just cut the video back on this camera, which I think was a very strange thing to do. Marcus has said, what's the A7 II like compared to the A7R III? It's like chalk and cheese, Marcus. I take two A7 IIs to weddings. I carry one as a backup, basically. I do use it for some things. I use my A7R II for all the formal shots, though. Things where it doesn't matter so much about resolution, like the bride's getting ready, the actual wedding ceremony, the reception and things like that, I'll use my A7 IIs, no problem. The second that I start to go into formal work, I'll tend to use the A7R II, because the range, the dynamic range and the file size is so much better. I can crop into that image. The focusing is so much better in the A7R II than the A7 II. But the A7 II, you're talking about, it's a fairly old camera now. That's why that has to be replaced. Roberto said, I'll wait for the A9R II. But you know what? The interesting thing, Roberto, is how much is that camera going to cost? Because if you look at it now, the way that the prices of the A7R II, I'm not sure what the cost is of the A9R, A7R2, I mean. Let's have a look. I'll just Google one. I'm just going to bring it up so we can have a look. I'll just put this on the screen so you can see what I'm doing, so you're not just looking at me. All right, so let's have a look. A7S2. I'll just give, I won't look Australia because it'll give you a guide how much they are. All right, so the A7S2 at the moment is still listed basically, we'll go to B&H so we can have a look in there. So if you're looking at B&H at the moment, it's 2.5. Wow, it has come down. It's come down an awful lot. Way down actually compared to what it was. That's a hell of a drop that it was, because I think it was about 3.5 when it was originally released. I know when the A7R2 at the moment is around about that price as well. That's why I'm thinking they're going to replace these cameras, because clearly they're dropping quite a lot at the moment. They're saying the normal price is 2.7. At the moment it's 2.598. But I know when they first came out, they were way over what that sort of cost is. I've got a feeling that if this is released as an A9R or an A7S, I think that they're probably going to be around about $1,000 dearer than what the A9 is at the moment. So you're going to have to think about how much that's going to cost you and whether that you want to jump up to that. That's why I think the A7 II or the A7 III replacement is probably going to be a similar price to what it is now, say around about $3,000. I think it'll be dearer than what the original one was, but it might be around about $3,000 US. And you'll get most of the features of the A9 apart from that fast frame rate. That's what I believe will probably happen. I'm hoping you still get double card slots. They have to change double card slots with the A7 IIs. The other thing they may release too is a fully articulating screen which will flip out. See, we don't know yet whether that's going to be available. They may even do that with the A9S. I'll just read a couple more questions over here. So Michael has said, I'll read a couple of others. I'll bring these on so that you guys can see them as well. Roberto has said, I don't care about the video. As far as I'm concerned, they should take it out altogether. Yeah, well, that's a good point, Roberto, and that obviously is probably the way that you want to shoot, and that's a fair point. If you're not interested in video at all, I can understand you thinking like that. I'm thinking more of a type of fusion photographer where I'm doing a video and stills at the same time. So for me, that's an issue. Clearly, so for you, it's not, and that's fine. Everyone wants different things from cameras, and that's fine. Michael said, yeah, not as sharp as the A7R II. I never thought that. Just wanted the file size. 24 megapixels is nice to be at. At NAB, I used the A9 again, and it was low light, but I couldn't keep the pics. And you know what, this is the interesting thing too. Everyone was talking about how well this went, but the problem was, and I've fallen for this trap as well, multiple times. I've taken a shot, I've looked on the back of the camera on my A7R II or the A7Ss or whatever I'm using, and it looks fine. Then I get back to the studio, download it, and it's misfocused a little bit. It's not quite right. Now, we don't know, because these guys were looking at the back of the screen when they were looking at a lot of these. So we don't know how well that they were going. And like I said, that test that Sony did was in complete control lighting. I'm hoping this is amazing, because trust me, if this turns out to be unbelievable once I see it, that might force me to want to go over. So I'm not saying I won't, but I still need to see this in real life. I'm very cautious about buying things on spec, because if you do, you may get caught out if it doesn't meet your needs. Let's read a couple more of these questions. Junad said, well, I meant the flagship. Oh, okay, A77 III. Yeah, well, that could happen. I mean, you know, they may still, obviously, the A99 is meant to be really, really good, the new one. I've heard nothing but good reports about that. I've never used that, but it's meant to be really, really good. If anyone has that camera, you can chime in and just tell me how much you love it. Ali said A9R2. That's a long wait, man. Yeah, I reckon it will be. Yeah, I think the A9R probably will be a bit longer than that. They may release an A7R2 update. They may do it that way and make it an A7R3, and then you might get a 50 megapixel. There's rumours going around that you may get that. Sony also has a new 70 odd megapixel camera as well. The problem for me is, that's why I only do the formal portraits in the wedding ceremony, because the file size end up being so big, and if I did a whole wedding on that, it ends up being astronomical, the file size. So, Michael, you're right, 24 megapixels can be an ideal file size. That's why I do like using the A7R2, the A7 II, and also my A6500, because that 24 megapixel size is great as a general file size. You just can't cut in like you used to. I often use the A7R2 and I'm using it in crop mode, super 35mm mode, and then I'm getting around about that 20 megapixel. So I can use it for both ways. You won't be able to do that with the A9 though, because basically you'll get, 12 megapixel file or something. It won't be enough. Let's have a look. Studat said, stick with my A6500. I love the A6500 Studat. It's a great camera. I'm using that now to film me. It's amazing and it's terrific. I'm on a shoot tomorrow, shooting a group of models. So you'll be able to watch that coming up shortly, and I'll be using that camera again. I just like to demo it too. I'm quite comfortable using that in a professional manner. People always say, oh, it's not professional. Rubbish. Like I said in other talks that I've had, it's the image that counts, not the camera you're using. So yeah, I'm going to use that tomorrow, I think. Let's have another look at what other people are saying. Good. So Roberto said, good equipment costs money. It is what it is. And you're right, Roberto. You know what? If you're like me, a professional photographer, you can write it off as part of your business. But it's still money that I've got to justify. I can't just go out and spend money willy-nilly. I've got to make sure that I'm going to earn enough money to buy this gear. What worries me is if I bought the A9 and then, like I said, because I'm a fusion photographer and I'm doing photography and video in my weddings now, what worries me if I go out and buy the A9 and they don't put log into this A9 and then they release an A9S straight after, which is 24 megapixels, that has probably very similar photographic things, just not the fast frame rate, and it'll have the 4K 60p in it. I'm probably going to be a bit devastated that I haven't got that camera. So that's what worries me a little bit. Let's have a look at some other questions. Studat says, people are getting carried away with these bodies. They are all amazing. Invest in glass. And that's probably true too, mate. Look, for me, it makes a difference. And I have the glass. If you are borderline on what you want to do, I definitely wouldn't recommend getting the the A9. I would probably say at the moment, get something like the A7R2, which at the moment is a bargain at the price they're asking for that camera at the moment. That camera is still going to be good for years ahead, and buy some glass. You could buy the A9R and get some amazing glass for less than what you'd pay for, getting an A9. So that's an interesting fact that you could do. What else is other people saying? Roberto said, thanks for reviewing my comments. No problem at all, Roberto. I love to have comments coming through here. Roberto also said, I have the first A99 and it's a beast. I can imagine the A99 Mark II. Yeah, and I've heard that is a really fantastic camera. I'd love to have a play with that. It's just a pity the glass, the E-mount and that don't mix. So it's a pity. Sammy Buka said, hello, Sony A9S is coming. 12 megapixel, 24 frames per second raw. Well, that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if you know that's fair income. I'm not sure. That fair income too is an Australian slang, means real. Ali said, wow. Yeah, so there's a few things that, like I said, I'm not convinced yet that I will go over. I think I might. It just depends. If this works out that it's an amazing wedding camera, that I can shoot in silent mode and not have any of these issues, and the focusing is a lot better under low light, I may go over. But at this stage, I'm not in a desperate need to move over. So it might be to me that I just hang out to sort of see what happens in the coming weeks. I don't think you'll have probably issues getting this camera. The price that they're asking for this camera, I don't think it's going to be like other cameras that were harder to get, because clearly it's at the higher end. So they're not going to be as sought after as, say, what a A6500 or something is. Chuck said, how much faster is the AF on the A6500 compared to the A7R2? It's much faster. The A6500 focusing is pretty amazing. I love the focusing on that camera. So obviously it's a step up compared to the A7R2. And the other thing too that you have to consider as well is that the A6500 is a much newer sensor in their focusing mode. If the A9 is a step above the A6500, I can imagine how good that actually must be. It still has a touch screen, but apparently it's basically as useless as what the A6500 one is. Basically all you can do is touch to focus. That's about all that's good for. I don't know why Sony, honestly, they make mobile phones that have amazing interfaces. Why on earth they can't put a decent touch interface on their cameras? Perhaps the A9S will have that. Studat said, I've seen you at High Point coming out at Ted's. Oh, you should have said hello, mate. High Point's a massive shopping centre near us. It's the biggest in the southern, one of the biggest in the southern hemisphere. Next time you're there, mate, say hi, pull me up, and we can have a chat. George Sorrell said, between the A6300 and the A6500, is there any difference when it comes to ISO performance? Colours or resolution? No, I've found them basically exactly the same. I can't pick any difference between the two. The main reason why I got this was because I got it for the touch screen, although I do use that. I use that particularly to rack focus, so that's an amazing feature. The other thing is too, the real benefit is it clears the buffer an awful lot quicker than what the A6300 did. If I want to review images, I can review them instantly after taking them, whereas the A6300 was very, very slow. The focusing too, I think, is better in the A6500 than the A6300. But for colours and resolution, I really don't think there's any difference, or ISO performance, George. No, I think they're exactly the same. I still think it's a worthwhile upgrade though. DI said, I have the A6500 and I'm waiting for the A7 III. Just hoping for better glass. Sigma is developing FE lenses. I know, I just can't wait for that. The day that Sigma or Tamron and companies like that start releasing glass, I'm going to support them immediately. I think there's a problem developing it because of that flange distance that someone mentioned. So that could be an issue. If you do want to have a crack up and a real laugh, have a look at the Angry Photographer's review of the A9, the Sony A9. You'll absolutely kill yourself laughing. I watched that yesterday and honestly, he was hilarious what he was talking about the buffer. So have a look at the Angry Photographer reviewing the Sony A9 and it is so funny. George said, I have a A6300, was thinking of getting a second camera as I moved from Canon to Sony, and I was looking at getting the A6500, but today I got a great deal on the A7R. Is that the A7R2 or the A7R, George? Because it says A7R1. I'm trying to figure out if I made the correct decision, mostly used for photos. So George, is it the A7R2 or is it the A7R1? I'll see what he says when he answers that, because it'd be interesting to see if it's the A7R2 or the A7 R1. Yeah, so keep firing your questions, guys. Let me know if you think you're all going to upgrade. How many people actually are? There's about 23 people watching this at the moment, so I'm interested to know if a few of you are going to upgrade and whether it interests you or not. So talk about that side of it to me. Give me an idea about how many of you are actually going to do it. Oh, George, so this is the A7R2. No, mate, you haven't made a mistake at all. I love that camera to death. It's amazing. Like I said, even if I get the A9R, I'm still going to keep my A7R2. If you're not convinced, George, have a look at Tony Northrup's video, and you'll see when in that video how he shows a difference between the A9R, the A9 and the A7R2 in files. The thing you have to overcome with that is it's slower, obviously. I mean, you just can't shoot the same way. But if it's for portraits, it's stunning, or landscapes, it's stunning. Yeah, so keep it, George. If you got a good deal on that, I'd definitely keep it. Ali's asked how much you've bought it from. So it'll be interesting to see what he says. G'day, Manny. How are you, mate? Good to see you in here. So Manny's thinking about buying it if he does more weddings. Yeah, look, that's the thing, Manny. I'm not convinced yet until I sort of try it. I may try and probably get a loaner and see if it suits my usage. Because like I said, I just want to try it in a real light situation, Manny. I want to actually see it work in a low light sort of venue. Because I know Max Urov, when he was talking the other day, he said, someone asked him the question about if they tried it for low light focusing, and he said no, it wasn't available. So I do want to try that, Manny, before I make a decision. I may still get it yet. Gas will get to me probably though, and I probably will. George said he got it for $2,000. So that's amazing, George. I mean, that's fantastic. If you got that camera for that much money, it's terrific. Studat said the Angry Photographer is a flog. He needs to use the camera before slamming it. You know what? I watch him a lot because he just makes me laugh. I mean, he hates Sony to death, and I'm not sure why he does. But I look at it from almost an enjoyment factor of watching the Angry Photographer. Some things he does is actually really, really good. I mean, his lens reviews are actually very good, and some of the things that he sort of makes are actually quite good as well. But he sometimes, honestly, is hilarious, and he can be a bit of a flog, but my God, I laugh my head off sometimes watching him. Have a watch of the one where he reviews the Sony A9S, the A9, it's hilarious. Marcus said, thinking of Sony from Nikon, just waiting to see what happens. I'm now buying lighting gear instead of lenses for Nikon. Yeah, Marcus, I'm not sure if you know about my story, but I was complete Nikon, I should say. I had the D4S, the D810, and the D700, and all of the lenses, the 70-200, f2.8, the 24-70, and the 18 to, I think it was a 10-18 lens, and a stack of others, the 85 1.4. I sold it all. Basically, I wanted to go Sony because of the weight and the advances that Sony had given me. So I sold all of that. I didn't lose much money at all. If you did want to sell, and I put an article about it the other day about switching to Canon, you won't lose much money at all. You could almost swap almost direct for direct and pay just a little bit of money, because your Nikon and Canon gears at the moment holds great value. People are saying they love Manny's work. So do I. Manny's great. I love following Manny. I've known Manny for a fair while now. He's really, really great. It's great to see you in here, Manny. Thanks for the support. Tim Harold said, keep hearing Manny say still the buffer, and it can take up to 3 minutes. That is the problem, and you spray and pray wasn't long ago. You only got to shoot someone on 20, not rely on 20 frames per second. I don't think the buffer issue really is that much of a real issue. Look, I can't understand anyone. A sports photographer is not going to shoot off 250 frames for a minute or so, or 2 minutes. They're going to shoot 1 or 2 seconds. It's about capturing that moment. So they're not going to basically spray and spray and spray away to fill the buffer up. I can guarantee that's the way that will work. I think that's basically trolls starting to hit that all the time. They're a bit intimidated by this camera and the frames per second. You'll be spraying off for 1 or 2 seconds at most, and then the buffer doesn't run out apparently. So I don't think the buffer is going to be an issue. And I also think Tony Northrup mentioned that, but I think someone mentioned that he'd had that card in the wrong slot, because it will make a big difference. I don't know why they didn't put the 2 high-speed cards in though. I think that was a bit silly. The secret is, I think, if you're going to back up, is to shoot one obviously RAW and have the backup slot as JPEG. At least if you have a failure, you can work from the JPEGs. But clearly, if you're going to shoot RAW, it's going to slow the camera down. Manny just said, I was initially inspired by David to start my channel. Well, that's fantastic, Manny, and look how much your channel's grown, mate. That's it's just amazing. What's Darren said? So UX22 said, I'm a Nikon shooter, don't know what to do. Nikon has me afraid right now. I know, and that's why I shifted. You know what, I sort of saw the writing on the wall of what was going to happen. It was 2 years ago that I made the switch. And like I said, I was so heavily invested, and it was a really big thing for me, because I work full time as a photographer. I'm doing, like I said, 30 weddings per year, doing fashion, doing portraits. Every shoot that I do is a paid shoot. Very, very, very rarely will it ever be a free shoot, and that's only because I might want to try something new. So everything for me is a paid shoot. So I had a lot to lose by shifting over. But when I did, I went all over, because I thought I can't use 2 systems. It's too hard to basically try and use one menu system and then switch over to another when you're trying to work quick. It's just too hard to do that. I was doing it with a Panasonic GH4 for video, and I was using the Nikon for the stills. And again, shooting between those two is a nightmare. So that's why I fully changed over. If I gave you my opinion at the moment about the way things are going, I think, honestly, if I was Nikon, I would be worried. I think the writing's on the wall for what's going to happen, unless they answer this, and I'm just hope it's not an IBM moment for companies like Nikon and Canon, where basically they shoot themselves in the foot by not innovating. I want them to succeed, because you need competition. If Nikon and Canon disappeared, well then Sony would have no need to innovate anymore. We don't want that, guys. We want those 2 companies to succeed. I changed because it suited me. So if you are thinking about changing over, you've got to make that decision yourself. It's a hard one, but I did, and I've never looked back. I used to have such sore shoulders and back from walking around carrying these digital SLR cameras, and now I never get that anymore. I can carry 2 cameras often, and I will show this. I'll shoot a live wedding. I'm shooting video with one hand, and I'm shooting the stills in the other hand at the same time, and I can do that easily because the cameras are so light. So that's a massive bonus for me. And just the EVF, I just could never go back to a digital SLR and lose that EVF. So let's have a look and see what some others have said. So Darren said he doesn't hate Sony, he just has a lot of Sony products. He just like to ask the questions that no one else will. And I think Darren's talking about the angry photographer. Yeah, look, take him on face values, guys. Don't take everything so serious. I actually think, and we say take the piss, which I think he's taking the piss out of a lot of it, because I think he likes to stir people up. Like I said, I'm a Sony shooter, and it doesn't upset me what he says. I actually laugh about it because I find it hilarious. Again, what we need to understand as we love gear so much, but you've got to not take it so personal when people say bad things about that gear. You know, like it's not going to hurt you, and if you're happy with it, who cares? And that's why I watch people like him, because it's so funny, but occasionally he comes up with some really good stuff. Let's have a look and see what else people are saying. Darren said staying with Nikon D500 and all that wonderful glass, and that's the thing. Yeah, look, I can understand that, Darren. Apparently the D500 is an amazing piece of kit, and obviously you do have all that amazing glass, which Sony still has to catch up on. They will, but it's going to take a long time. What else? Marcus said, Manny is great, love your channel. I find him not as up himself as Jason Lanier. Well, that's an interesting comment. Manny is very, very down to earth. Jason's a good bloke as well. Studat, this is because of the angry photographer. No one holds the shutter down to fill a huge buffer. What else? UX22 said, I bought the A6 500 to see if I like Sony. I loved it, but now wish I bought the A7R2. You know what? I never ever regret buying the A6 500. I know Manny uses the A6 500 and loves it, don't you, Manny? So the thing is, it's a stunning camera. Anyone that says you can't use that for professional work is lying, guys. You don't have to have this really expensive camera to do professional work. There is nothing wrong with using the A6 500 for professional work. Like I've said to people before, I work with advertising agencies, high-end advertising agencies. I've never ever had one of them query about what camera I use. Now, admittedly, I use Profoto lighting, so I suppose that's one aspect of it, but even then, no one's even asked me about that. They hire me for my portfolio. You can check my portfolio if you look online. They're always listed underneath my YouTube videos. You can go and check my work there. I'm confident of what I produce. That's all that matters. You just have to be confident about what you produce. The camera doesn't matter. It's what's up here that matters. So don't let anyone tell you the A6 500 is not good enough. It is. It's an amazing camera. Let's have a look. So, yeah, Manny said I'll never go back to the optical viewfinder as well. I know, Manny, I couldn't go back. I love that, being able to not have to chimp down all the time, see the exposure that you get. It's just stunning. And once you've used that optical viewfinder, and apparently then the A9, that's one thing that might sway me, is the optical viewfinder is meant to be so good. So, yeah, I'd hate to go back to that. I just couldn't live with that now. Studat said Jason Lanier is far extreme of the angry photographer man. He is just a mouthpiece for Sony. I love honest people, not fanboys. Ali said, George, can you give info where you got the amazing deal from the A7R2 from? And what's Studat said about the angry photographer? He's not. I don't look. To be honest, I like Jason Lanier. I find him very honest, but that's just me, and everyone has their own personal opinion about how these work. And I find he's actually a very nice bloke, but other people may see different things, but that's just me personally. Manny said, exactly, I find him entertaining regardless of what he says about Sony. I know, Manny, honestly, the angry photographer is hilarious. When he starts doing these things with bananas on his face, doing calls to people and stuff, he is just hilarious. Guys, you've got to take it basically like an entertainment channel. You can't base it on, and we are Sony, obviously, a lot of us people that are on here, but you can't take it personally what he's saying. Just watch it for the entertainment value. It's so funny. Ulick, I think it's Uric, is it? Has said, hello, David from Caledonia. My A7R2 just arrived yesterday, after many APS, after the APS full frame camera. You're going to love it. It's amazing. Manny was saying, yes, love it, and you are correct. I know Manny, if you follow his YouTube channel, is using the A6 500 a lot. I'm using an awful lot now. It's a great camera, so don't discount it, guys. It's great. Ulick said, what do you think about the 16 to 35 f4? It's great. I use that camera, I use that lens all the time. If I'm doing landscapes and stuff, I'm using it. When I'm shooting brides, if I'm in a tight situation, I'll use it. That's a great lens. I even use the 10, I can't remember the other lens. I think it's the 10 to 18. The APS-C lens on my full frame, because you can use it about 12 millimeter to something like, I I can't remember, but you can still use it. That works very, very well as well. So you can use that APS lens as well. But the 16 to 35 is fantastic. If Sony do release a 2.8 version, I will definitely buy that in a heartbeat, because that's the only thing I wish it was a bit faster. But it's a great lens. Let's have a look. George said he bought that camera from Best Buy Open Box. That was the A7R II for 2000. That's a great buy. You certainly can't go wrong with that. Ali said, okay, thanks, man. UXO22 said, Manny and David, I really think that you guys keep it 100% all the time. I really trust your opinions. Keep up the great work. Well, thanks, mate. That means a lot to me. I'm sure it means a lot to Manny too. So, yeah, I'm always going to tell the truth. There's no way known I'll ever be bought out by anyone and not tell the truth. So I'm sure Manny's the same way. Day said, so he's a comedian. I just thought he had issues. No, look, he's not. I think everyone takes him the wrong way, the angry photographer, honestly. He's a very intelligent man, and I think he knows exactly what he's doing. He's trying to push buttons and people are falling for it. Watch it like it's an entertainment type thing, and you'll laugh your head off. It's hilarious. Yeah, the 10 to 18, George said. Well, that's a great lens, George, the 10 to 18. I often use that on my full frame as well. Like I said, you can get it from about 12 to 16. So if I find that my 16 to 34 is not wide enough, for instance, after a wedding, I'll do a group shot, always. If I can't fit those people in with the 16 to 35, I'll use that 10 to 18 because it gives me 12mm on full frame. And it's a great lens. It's not quite as sharp as the 16 to 35, but it's actually really quite good. If you're interested in seeing how that handles against the 16 to 35, watch Dave Dugdale. He did a comparison between the 10 to 18 and the 16 to 35 in one of his videos. So have a look at that and you'll see it's actually a very good review. I said I sub Manny as well. Very good videos. Ali said Jason is a talented photographer. Yeah, Jason's been around a long time. He is a talented photographer. I think some people dislike him because he's so Sony orientated and because he swapped from Nikon. But like I said, I've found him a great bloke. Studat said he is talented indeed. Watch his old videos before he sold himself out. They were amazing. Ulrich Tesla said, I know that you love the 35mm focal length. Which one do you have? What do you think about the Sigma 35 Art adapted? Look, that lens, I used to have the Sigma 35 Art lens. It was the Nikon version. And I sold that lens. I don't like any adapted lenses, and I'm just being honest to you here. I find I want to go completely native in what I do. I just find the focusing is better, and I don't want to have to deal with adapters because it adds weight. The whole thing about me is I want to be minimalistic. I want to carry as little gear as is possible. So for me, I just want to carry the 35 1.4, the Sony, and then that's it. I don't want to have to deal with adapters. So there's a couple of 35s that I love, and I have the 35 1.4, and I also have the 35 2.8, which is an amazing lens. I haven't got that here. I was looking at that yesterday. No, I haven't got it. I should have brought it out. Yeah, so I've got the 2.8 version, which is great as well. I love that focal length. Like I said, that's my favorite focal length is the 35. So I use those two lenses all the time. The other one I've got obviously on the A6500 is the 24 1.8, which is probably my favorite lens of all time, that one. And that gives me a 35 focal length on the A6500. So they're the ones that I use. So I haven't used the Sigma lenses at all, but like Sigma makes very good quality lens, so I'm sure it's good. I think Manny was using, you were using some Sigma lenses, Manny, weren't you? So you might be able to chime in and say how you found it using an adapter. Studat said, I've been turned away from the Sony 18 to 105. I know you use it, but the sharpness is just not there in comparison to the 16 to 70. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've been really happy with my 18 to 105. I love that lens. I take that everywhere, and I found mine is so sharp. Perhaps I've got a good version. I also like that focal length too. So for me, it's a great travel lens because it's so wide and also can go so long. And with the clear image zoom, you know, I can get over 200mm with that lens. So I found it just a fantastic lens, and yeah, I love that lens, but perhaps I've just got a good version. Let me know if anyone else has got the 18-105 and let me know what you think about that. I know that lens always hits a lot of views whenever I view that lens, or whenever I review it on YouTube. What else? Tim said Sony mirrorless cameras are the best. Yeah, and I probably think they are. Look, I'd love to try Fuji too. I mean, I've heard nothing but good things about Fuji, but for me, I'm locked into the Sony system at the moment. But Fuji too seems really good. So hit me up with a couple more questions, guys, because we're going to have to go soon, because it's an hour. I don't know how long this lets me stay on, actually. It might cut us off. So if we do get cut off, it's just that YouTube cuts us. I'm not sure if it does. Manny said, yes, I use the 35 1.4 ARP with the LA EA3 adapter and the 135 1.8 with the MC11. Focusing is okay, but not as good as native. Yeah, and he said, I can see why you only shoot native. And that's the thing that, see, for me, if you're being in control shoots where time is not such a factor, like if you're just doing a portrait where you can slow down a little bit, it wouldn't be a problem using that. But because I shoot weddings and stuff, I haven't got that time to slow down, so I need something that's really, really fast, that the IAF works really, really good, and I don't have to worry about it slowing down and focusing. So, you know, that's an issue. I mean, I've heard that 135 is an amazing lens, Manny, but the only option for me, I mean, look, problem is it's so expensive. Look at Zeiss. I mean, they've given that 135, it's only a 2.8 and it's $2,000 US or something. It's probably $3,000 Australian. So I can understand, Manny, why you're using that 135. You're not tempted to get the Sony version, Manny, or the Zeiss? Sony is so sharp, Tim said. UXO22 said, I have the 18-105. The only thing I don't like is the power zoom. I never use that power zoom either. I'll just manually zoom with it. DI said, I have the 18-105, but also looking at getting something better in low light. That's why I bought the 24 1.8. That's the reason why I got that lens, is for the low light. And plus I love that 35mm focal length. It's not cheap. It was about over $1,000 Australian, I think. Well, it's $1,000 US, so it's not a cheap lens. It's a gorgeous lens though. Any other questions, guys, before we wrap up for the end of the day? Obviously, if you have questions and we finish this video, leave them down below and I can get back to you. And I always answer questions, always. So you can leave those down below as well. And please, you know, just give us a thumbs up. That's great sort of thing. Clearly, if you're not following Manny, you should follow Manny. He's a great YouTuber as well. And I always check his videos out as well as Jason Long, the camera guy. They're always great, all these people. Manny said, no, not at all, too much. I know, that's the problem. It is, Manny, that Zeiss is too dear for 2.8. I know Jason Long just did a talk about that on YouTube the other day, and he said he loved it. He checked it out at NAB. Do you own the 70-200 GM? No, I don't. I don't own the 70-200 GM. I've got the 70-200 f4. I'm not probably going to buy the GM 70-200 or the 24-70. I'm quite comfortable using the f4 versions of those lenses due to size and weight. So for me, it's not an issue. And to be honest, I'm tending to do most of my shooting now with primes. So I'm mostly using the Zeiss 85 and the 35 1.4, and I can basically get the whole wedding done with those two lenses. And I also have the 55 too, if I want to sort of have that typical portrait type shoot as well. So I'm only using the 70-200 for compression. So the only time I'll ever drag that out is if I want to bring that background in. So apart from that, I'm not using it at all. So I'm only getting that out occasionally. I do take it to every wedding, but I'm not using it that much. So there's no real advantage for me to get the 70-200. Shootout said, I tried Fuji, bought the XT20 and sold it a month later. Looks great on the back of the screen, but zoom in a little and the image falls apart. Yeah, well, perhaps the sensor's just not as good. I've never used one, so I can't sort of talk about that. And Yurik said, I can confirm David always reply. I do. I'll always reply to questions that are put in. I make sure that no matter how many people ask a question, I'll always reply to it. Well, we might call it a day there, guys. Let me know, like, down below if you are thinking about getting it, and I'll sort of talk to you about whether I'm going to get it once I have a look at it. Hopefully some reviews, real world reviews, will be coming out in a couple of weeks. I know it's released, this A9's released at the end of the month. It's the first week here in Australia. So if the reviews come out positive in those couple of weeks beforehand, when it's being used in real life, I may then put it on pre-order or just buy it the second I can get it when it's in the shops. It's $7,000 Australian here, so it's quite expensive. But that's the way I'm feeling at the moment. But no matter what, I'll be still keeping my A7R II because I'll be using that still for formal portraits and the wedding formals, because clearly the image is better that you're getting from the A7R II than the A7 III. You too, Manny. Look forward to seeing your next video, mate. One time we'll have to have a chat together and do a live broadcast. That'll be fantastic. One from down under and one from the States. Your successor said, have a great day in Melbourne. Hopefully I will. It's 10:36 here. I'm just about to go down and have a coffee. My daily ritual. And then I'll be then heading out for the day and getting ready for the shoot that I'm doing tomorrow. I'll put up some more videos soon for you guys as well. So thanks so much, guys, for the great chat. Like I said, I just love having chats with you guys. It's all about this for me. And we'll all talk again soon. So bye for now, guys, and see you all again soon. Don't forget to follow Manny if you're not following him. Bye.